It's been a most unusual election campaign from the very start, when a soggy Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called the snap poll in the rain.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future.
He called the election in the wake of some good news on inflation, making the case that he'd helped the country recover faster than expected after years of global turmoil.
Only a Conservative government will not put our hard-earned economic stability at risk.
But here in the UK, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who thinks that Mr Sunak's going to be re-elected. Already struggling in polling, the campaign and a series of self-inflicted crises only seem to have dampened the Conservatives' hopes. After spending the first fortnight of the campaign unveiling policies that seemed designed to appeal to their base, like a plan for national and community service for young people, he then kicked a spectacular own goal when he left D-Day commemorations in Normandy early for a TV interview.
Apologies for keeping you.
No, not at all. I'm sure it's a powerful trip.
And in the final weeks of the campaign, dealt with allegations that Conservative candidates and staff placed bets on when the election would be held just before the PM announced it. And if they'd used confidential information to do so, that's potentially a criminal offence. If polling's even remotely a guide, it's looking like the Conservatives' 14 years in power will end with a brutal rejection at the ballot box. This could even be the worst election defeat in British history. A vast number of polls are now suggesting broadly the same thing, that the Conservatives are around 20 percentage points behind Labor in popular support.
The Conservative campaign seems to be run on a basis of how far we can drive down our own vote in the course of this election. It's almost as if they've been planning to lose by the biggest amount possible.
So, the near universal expectation is a new Prime Minister is about to be elected, Labor leader Sir Keir Starmer. Let's take a look at the current state of the House of Commons. The Conservatives under Rishi Sunak have 344 of the 650 seats. Labor have 205. And there are a series of minor parties and independents, the biggest among them at the moment, the Scottish Nationalist Party. So Labor does need to pick up a lot of seats, more than 120 of them, or nearly 20% of the seats in Parliament. Ordinarily a big ask, but this election is a peculiar one.
But in this election, one side has completely devastated their base of support, and the other isn't doing that much to enthuse them to vote. It's very different, and it's a very different style of politics.
It may end up being the case that Labor wins a record-breaking number of seats with a smaller share of the vote than it won in 2017, when it lost the election. That's because of the UK's first past-the-post electoral system. There's no preferences and there's no compulsory voting. In each seat, the candidate who wins the most primary votes is elected. For example, if Labor comes first in a seat with the Conservatives narrowly behind and the right-wing Reform UK in third place, in Australia, most of those Reform votes would flow in the form of preferences to help the Conservatives win. But in British politics, there's no second choices. Those votes stay where they are, and the biggest number wins. That could really hurt the Conservatives because they're losing votes on all flanks. On the left, to Labor, to the Liberal Democrats who occupy a space in the centre. Its leader, Ed Davey, has run an energetic campaign. And on the right, to that rising force in Reform UK, the spiritual successor to the UKIP party, led by one of the most prominent Brexiteers, Nigel Farage.
But we're going to wave you goodbye.
The Reform leader is trying to win a seat on his 8th attempt. The party's not expected to win many seats, but it could still have a major impact. Most of their supporters voted Conservative in 2019, so every voter Farage woos in a marginal seat makes things harder for Rishi Sunak. A look at Britain's electoral map will show us why. Here's the result of the last election, when Boris Johnson won seats that were traditionally Labour held, the same areas that voted strongly for Brexit. Labour's seats were concentrated in the bigger cities, including London. Most estimates suggest this time the government might win only as many as between 50 and 150 seats. Even if they get a number at the highest end of that range, that would be the worst election result for the Conservatives in the history of the modern party. Here's one of those estimates from YouGov. It suggests Labor will reclaim many seats in the north and Midlands of England, win seats from the SNP in Scotland, while the Liberal Democrats could win a swathe of seats from the Conservatives in the south of England. If the result looks anything like that, it'll be an ignominious defeat for a party that won a convincing majority just 5 years ago. Since then, things have been chaotic. There's been a revolving door of prime ministers, then the pandemic, when it emerged government figures, including the Prime Minister, had been flouting social distancing rules and having parties.
Hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
And the brief but disastrous Liz Truss 49-day premiership. And it doesn't seem like Rishi Sunak's been able to turn things around. Labor's maintained an election-winning lead in the polls since 2022.
So many working people have felt that their lives have been going backwards and nothing has been done to make their lives better. In fact, over the last 14 years, it's got a lot worse.
Whatever happens, the next government is going to have a long list of challenges ahead of it. The 2019 election was all about Brexit. Back then, most people ranked it among the most important issues facing the country in polling for YouGov. Now, it's the economy at the top of the list amid acute cost of living pressures, the state of the National Health Service, and immigration, an issue more important for Conservative voters and much, much more important for Reform voters.
Let June the 23rd go down as our Independence Day.
The electorate is fragmenting into smaller camps, like we're seeing in Australia and other countries. And that means that building political consensus could get more difficult. Keir Starmer is far more popular than the current Prime Minister, but still not that popular. Even with a massive majority in Parliament, governing a country that's so disillusioned with politics won't be easy.